Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Just want to check that you're able to hear me speaking to you. If you're able to hear me this evening, please can you click the raise your hand symbol on your console? That's brilliant. Thanks, everybody. Now I know you can hear me. We will start. I would like to welcome you to the second in JGSGB's current series of webinars, which is Brickwall Strategies. And our webinar facility is brought to you with thanks to IAJGS, who allow us to use their GoToWebinar function. There won't be any need for you to take notes unless there's something particularly that occurs to you during the evening. Over the next day or so, I will send out the handout with the links to all of the websites that I'm going to mention this evening. So we are going to go through all sorts of different ideas for how you can break through your genealogy brick walls, and perhaps give you a few hints and tips of some other places that you might choose to do some research that will help as well. So if you can't find your great-grandfather, and this page actually appears on genealogist Steve Morse's website, then perhaps we will have some clues for you this evening. I think the first place to begin is to realise and recognise that everybody gets brick walls and blockages in their genealogy research. And there are a number of different things that you can do. Firstly, you can stop, perhaps watch the seasonal television that will be on over the next few days, then come back refreshed with a fresh pair of eyes in a couple of weeks or so. Or perhaps you want to research a different bit of your tree instead, and then maybe come back again refreshed and look at your brick wall in, as I say, in a few days or so. Sometimes some of the things that you can do instead might be a different kind of family history research. You might research your ancestral houses, places your family lived in, who the neighbours were, finding out more detail, because as genealogists, we don't just want to find the names and dates of places that where our ancestors lived. We actually want to understand what was happening in their community, in history more generally, what was happening in the local country. Historical facts, for example, can provide great insights into the ways that our ancestors lived. So whether you're finding out about your little green relatives from Mars or your relatives from Eastern Europe, I'm sure there'll be some clues in here this evening for you. When you're looking at approaching your brick wall, you need a plan. So there are plenty of genealogy documents that you can download that will help you organize the information that you are putting into your research. And I find it helps to compile the problem that you're trying to solve all into one place, so you can see all of the facts at a glance, because sometimes the very fact of arranging the information that you know about what happened to a family at a particular time can allow you to see a pattern in the data that will take you towards the resolution of your brick wall in the first place. So you always start off by setting your objective and then looking at your previously found information. And of course, it helps if you document where you've researched as you go along, and that you source your information in your family tree, because that will save you time going over old research, and it means you'll be able to check for updated records. And you can also make your sources more precise, not only so you trust your sources and you know where you've researched, but so other people you might share your research with would be able to replicate the search that you have undertaken. As part of your research, you're going to ask lots of questions. These are going to be the common sorts of questions you'll want to find out about any activity or anything that happened to your family. So my first list of things to do for you. So you're going to review what you've got, reorganize and reorder it, check back, check your filing, check your facts, don't make any assumptions, see if you spot anything that you might see or do differently. You need to be organized. You need to have your filing in order. You might have something not quite in the right order. Reordering the data, knowing where you've looked, might show a gap in where you've looked and therefore give you somewhere else to look. Don't assume. Make sure you're using documented facts. Check the dates carefully. Check the information source. Go back to original documents wherever possible. Broaden your search. Have new records come online since you looked at a particular set of records. Check what other sources are available. Sometimes you have to go sideways to go backwards. So you might have to research collateral families. You might have to research the neighbours if you can't find your family. See if they were still living side by side, perhaps in the next census. Sometimes you need to find maiden names, women's surnames before they were married. Sometimes you need to go forwards and find out about death data, because that can just help. Sometimes it's about going through a set of data, looking at pictures of records that may not have been indexed. Sometimes going that longer route can mean you find the information you're looking for. I recommend using a website called Cindy's List as part of your research. Cindy has a website of websites, and it's a portal to use to step into most subjects that you'll come across as you do your research. Cindy's got a research plan template, and I find it quite useful when I'm problem solving. So it can help you set out the information you're looking for. Other things that you can do to break a brick wall: talk to your relatives and your friends. Research collaboratively. Get a mentor. But don't forget always to check the research yourself. Don't forget you're not going to assume. You're going to network widely with your relatives, your friends, perhaps with other JGSGB members, more widely with Jewish Gen or beyond. So lots of different opportunities to ask different groups of people who will also have undertaken research the same place as you. You might want to work as a group. You could crowdsource. You can collaborate. You can set up research projects, digitization projects, all sorts of different options that will help you bring additional data about the community that you're researching online. It will broaden your research possibilities. You might, for example, want to use JGSGB's Facebook page, suggesting what you've done already to research, and then maybe somebody will give you a clue of somewhere else that you can look. You might find that you're related to someone in a group that way. Same goes for Jewish Gen. And of course, there are a number of other large Facebook groups for Jewish genealogy. In the States, there's a man called A.J. Jacobs, who's really taken crowdsourcing to excess. He's just published a book about his worldwide family reunion that took place last year. Definitely worth crowdsourcing to see if you can find some additional relatives, no matter how distant they may be. You might want to use newspapers to advertise to see if somebody comes forward as a member of your family. Or post to a forum, send a message to JGSGB Discuss. Netiquette is the internet etiquette to make sure that you're not doing your postings, for example, all in capital letters. You might want to write to a genealogy magazine, join a list, join a special interest group, set up alerts. There's no shortage of things that you can do to potentially break down your brick wall. Here we have the Jewish Telegraph, which has a roots column, and you can write to the roots column, and they publish your inquiry. I think it's a monthly column. You can write to them, and hopefully you will get an answer to your query. Query does, although it's the Jewish Telegraph based in Manchester and with Leeds and Glasgow editions, your research doesn't have to be limited to those places. You might want to read widely in genealogy magazines. And I'm suggesting reading more widely just than in our own magazine, Shemot. Go general, go into the more generic, regular family history magazines. You'll find other information that may well solve your problem. So lots of different family history magazines exist. They don't all specialize in Jewish ancestry, but there may be tips and techniques in the more generic magazines that will be useful to help you with your research. You might want to subscribe to a paid-for source of records or to an email list. There are lots of genealogy podcasts. You don't need to have an iPod or whatever, a generic Apple device to listen to podcasts via iTunes. There are no shortage of them that you can subscribe to on a regular computer rather than just an Apple. There are some Jewish newsletters. There are some more generic, non-Jewish genealogy newsletters. There's no shortage of different sources. So there's a research log. We've also got a research log on JGSGB's website that was put together as a log that's quite useful for researching Jewish family history. But other things you might want to look at are timelines, gap analysis, etc. We'll look more at those in a moment. If you've got a research log, it helps you with sourcing your data so that you can go to what you've researched later on to write it up and enter the pertinent facts into your family tree. Helps you organize your information, reduces duplication. You can create a timeline so you know where your ancestor was and when they were there. So that might give you a clue of the journeys they took, the times that they arrived in a country, and the like. When did they move house? You might create a mind map about the different facts you know about your ancestor, where they were and what they were doing at a particular time, with what each of the particular records that you've got tells you about their life. Jewish genealogist and friend of JGSGB, Ron Ahrens, has written a book about mind mapping for genealogy, and I think we have a copy in JGSGB's library. You can do as I've done, create a picture of the surnames that you're researching, of your immediate ancestors, and then perhaps put that as your profile photo on Facebook. It may mean that people contact you because they happen to have family that they're researching with the same surname as you. Lots of different ways of arranging your data exist. You might want to do a few other things to take your genealogy learning in a different direction, and that will also help break your brick wall. You might want to read some old handwriting. This is German script. It's particularly difficult to read if you're not experienced. Once you can read old German script, it gets a little bit easier. Similarly, old secretarial handwriting in England, if you've got old English records in your family history, or old Scottish records, or in fact old records from pretty much anywhere in Eastern Europe, where there are different languages and different handwriting. There are lots of places you can learn more about different research techniques. So the BBC has some family history pages. The UK's National Archives has got learning, and of course the Mormons. And there's lots of learning that you can access all free via the Family Search website. Although please note that since fairly recently, you are required to register and set up a password for yourself to access the Family Search website. As well as looking internationally or globally, you can also think more locally to see what other local records you can find. So as well as the free BMD, birth, marriage and death records, there's the UK BMD. There are local BMDs covering particular areas. There are websites covering port records, local historical directories, and the like. Other ways that you can find data might be available through your local history library. So you might want to find websites, plot maps, see what cemeteries exist, see if you can find the cemetery map, who's buried in surrounding graves, were they in a larger family plot, and the like. Always pays to befriend your local historians and archivists. They can be really useful to you in your research. You can look in the local papers, you can look in the Jewish press. For example, this example, which you'll see in a number of my webinars, will show you how you can reconstitute families because of the connections outlined in each of the death notices on this particular column. The extent of the family information all depends on how much the family putting the death notice in were prepared to pay, of course. In terms of local research, you might want to go to your local studies archive, maybe the one close to where you live, or perhaps the one close to where your family lived. And these are two local archives in the sort of Tower Hamlets area, both of which have records of use to people whose families lived in that area. One moment, please. Other places you can go to find out information. You might want to look at passenger lists if your family moved, if they travelled. You could go to the National Archives at Kew, or you can research in their records from home or in a library. Look at other passenger lists, perhaps that have been reconstituted from arrival lists. Excuse me. Of course, not all passenger lists were kept, although some do exist, so you're not necessarily always going to find everything on a passenger list. There are other sources for potential immigration brick walls. For example, people might have come in through a different port. You may need to search for other dates. You may need to get creative on the names that were used. Sometimes families didn't come all together. Maybe the man in the family came first, or a single older son, and then other people followed up. You also need to check that you've got every page. For example, this is page 1 of an arrival manifest for the United States. Important to check for page 2, because the columns on page 2 give you the name of the person that they last stayed with, and they also give you the address, the name and the address of the relative that they were going to when they reached the United States. So always check for page 2 on your passenger manifests. More things that you can do involve being online, and there are always lots of frequently asked questions and info files. But of course, not everything is online, far from it. Now, Google can be really helpful to genealogists, so important to use search engines in your research. Google can be so useful that in fact there are a number of books written about specifically using Google for family history. This is one book that I found quite useful. Other records also exist, but clever searching can help you use a wildcard to search without adding too much information and thereby excluding results. You might need, as I said earlier, to look through images of records because not everything has been digitized into searchable text yet. You might find information such as sharing of photos leads you to additional information about your family. And then there's what's called cousin bait, by putting small parts of your immediate family tree online to see who finds your tree, to see who follows up your bit of tree information, because if they're related to you, then they may well be a family, or maybe they'll know your family, or they knew your family, or they have photos or letters about them. That can happen. It happened to me a few years ago. I had a completely random email from a woman in Germany who told me that her mother used to be a pen pal of my mum's when they were girls, and she had photos of my mum as a young girl, my grandparents, my great grandmother, and only through searching for surnames in combination did she find me. We've stayed in irregular contact, but it's nice to be able to make those sorts of connections. Finding her and seeing her photo has allowed me to put additional names on the back of the extensive photo collection that I had, where I didn't know who some of the people were on the collection of photos that I've got here. So don't forget, write on the backs of your photos if you know who people are. I mentioned cousin bait, and the term cousin bait came from a website called Wikitree, which is a bit like, it's sort of social media for genealogists, although probably more people use Facebook, but it's a family tree social media, and they suggest putting bait out so you can go fishing. I'm sure you get the term. It's about baiting the hook and waiting for people to come along and dangling the hook out there baited to have your relatives come and find you and hook on that bait to connect to your family tree. So there are lots of different websites you can use to find or to place your cousin bait out there. Anywhere that's got a website, you can put your tree up, and they will have your contact details, and that will encourage people to come to you. You might also want to put names, if you've done a DNA test, into your DNA test site. You'll want to put your records on GEDmatch, for example, to fish in a wider pond. There is no end to the places that you can seed some cousin bait. But I mentioned, of course, that not everything is online. And of course, there are many, many more websites that you can use for genealogy than Ancestry and Google, of course. One of the other things that you can do if trying to break down a brick wall is to come at your research problem from a different direction. Perhaps you want to plot the places they lived on a map. From that, you might see how far a journey was, how far away did the bride live from the bridegroom. You can plot not only your immediate family, but also some of the other people that they were associated with, the witnesses on the marriage contracts, for example, neighbours, in-laws, cousins, and the like. It might mean you go and research some records in a neighbouring town or village, for example. There's a nice Yiddish word that's potentially useful to us here, and that is landslide. Literally, it's the people who were your people from back home, from the old country. And when people moved to a new country, particularly while they were getting set up and finding their way around, people tended to stay with people who had come from where they came from back in the old country. So sometimes it's worth checking the census schedules for your family to see if there were any visitors in the house on census night, to see where they came from. It may be just that hint that takes you back to your ancestral town in Eastern Europe. So now a few more useful websites. I'm sure you've come across them already. The Jewish Gen website, use it as your Jewish genealogy encyclopedia. We'll be having a completely separate webinar on using Jewish Gen on another day. Steve Morse's website, the One Step website, more of that very soon. And of course, Avatenu. Avatenu is a major Jewish genealogy publisher. Excuse me. A lot of the reference volumes we have in the JGSGB library have been published by Avatenu, but they also have a website and a journal which have lots of useful information. The journals in our library. So Jewish Gen, constantly changing, new information added all the time, geographic-based special interest groups, adding new data to Jewish Gen all the time. Definitely worth registering on there. Steve Morse has developed a lot of different ways to search some of the main websites. The websites that they refer to will have a $ next to them if they're a paid for website, but not all of the places that Steve's websites refer to require you to have a paid for membership. You'll need to check and look at the individual databases. So this is Avatenu. It's been going 27 years now, and the journal is a very underused resource in JGSGB's library. Come to think of it, also in the Society of Genealogists library. I'm a happy subscriber to Avatenu in print. They have an online access to all of their articles for $35. So if you're looking for a winter holiday present for Hanukkah that's just finished, or if you're a Christmas celebrating person and you want an early present, $35 of online access to Avatenu's back catalogue may just be the present that you're looking for. I mentioned earlier Cindy's List's website. Cindy's List is the place that I go to when I'm researching on a new topic or if I'm stuck. She's got a couple of sections that are useful. One on brick walls, as does Brickwall genealogy. But I go to Cindy's List whenever I'm looking at new topics because there's always a jumping off point that I can use. On her website that will take me to some additional resources. Of course, you're going to need to know what you can do and where you might need the help of others. So we'll look at that now. So JGSGB runs a mentoring program for our members. We have a short time lag on mentoring at the moment. I have a few people I'm in the process of matching. If you're one of those people, you've asked me for a mentoring match, I will be matching you over the next few days. Mentoring is where you can get some signposting and advice from another JGSGB member, perhaps somebody who has already researched a particular topic. And it's a way of sharing research, having ideas to bounce off an individual to give you help with the research that you're doing. Other things you can do, buy books, yeah. Anybody can find all sorts of problem-solving books for family history. You're already attending this webinar, so you know about that. You might want to post on your blog about your research problem, and maybe another genealogist will find your posting and will send you an answer. All of these things are possible. If you're book buying, you might want to buy one of JGSGB's award-winning Jewish Ancestors Guides. We have them on sale at our meetings, and they're available through the click-through shop on the JGSGB website. If you're looking for more advanced help with your family history, that exists as well. I'm a happy reader of this particular book. It's got some more advanced research techniques that potentially can help with breaking down brick walls. This won't necessarily be for everybody, though. There are some clues as to how to go about researching in this book as well. Again, a book that I own a copy of and that I've found particularly interesting, useful, and talking about techniques. The main focus of the Helen Osborne book is particularly England and Wales, but actually it's about methodology and how to go about doing more complex research and sourcing and presenting the information that you've found and then using it to jump into other types of research. One of the books that I read that's been particularly influential on my own research has been the Family History Nuts and Bolts book, and I've now read it in the first, second, and third editions, and it gets ever more useful. It's about how to reconstitute family or problem solve family history through reconstituting families, and it gives you a few clues and ideas using a whole variety of different records for an individual place, for example, and how to cross-match records and the like. I definitely recommend this one. This one won't break the bank. It's not that expensive a book. All the information about the books will be in the handout that I'm going to send out to you. So you're attending our webinar, but we're not the only people running webinars. A lot of IAJGS societies are running webinars too. There are lots of other free family history webinars rather. And then there's the Genia Webinars website, which is where you can go to find what other webinars are running. And people who choose to use that are publicizing the information about the title and the topics for their webinars and how you can go about signing up to them. Another thing that you might do to break down a brick wall would be to look at a cluster of research. So this is the going sideways or down so that you can go up. So you can try to work out how an individual might be related to you. You might need to plot it into a mini family tree to see, perhaps it will lead you to another set of records, so you'll know more. A couple of more techie things now that you can do. You can learn about Soundex. So we have the Dach Mokotov Soundex, which you can read about on the Jewish Gen info files. We have ViewMate. If you've got a document, perhaps in a language that you don't understand, maybe it was written in Hebrew, maybe you need somebody's help to decipher, I don't know, Polish. So we have ViewMate, that's on Jewish Gen, and can be very helpful if in your research. And then Google, you don't just have to buy the book, but you can also download Google's cheat sheets that explain to you how to excuse me, how to make the most out of your research and out of the searches that you do, so that you get the best results that will help you. And of course, Google will translate websites for you, or translate itself, particularly if you're using the Chrome browser. They're in multiple different languages. One moment, please. That can be really useful. You might also want to search on a different version of Google. So I often use the Google Germany site, google.de, because you get different search results in a different order on the different Google pages. But more of that another time. There are also a lot of other websites that you can use that aren't strictly, well, none of those are Jewish. None of them are particularly genealogy, but all of them have use for Jewish genealogy and family history research. If you want to find previous versions of websites that you found helpful, that's the Wayback Machine and the Internet Archive. loads of books available online on Google Books. Video Jug is the place to go for lots of how-to videos. Qt PDF, a free-to-use PDF utility, allows you to print documents or websites to a PDF document. Lots of genealogists are using Evernote to record their research notes and other information. Library Thing is social networking for librarians. It's a way of sharing your book collection, not the entirety of the book, but the title, publisher, number of pages, author, etc. Delicious is it's on the road to dying, but it was a website that allowed you to save your favorite URLs, and then you could log into it from any computer and be able to log into your saved favorites. Some aspects of that website have now been put on ice. I'm not sure what its long-term future is. Feedly is a blog aggregator. It's a website that you can use if you read lots of genealogy blogs. You can store the feeds of the blogs so you register on Feedly, and then you store in there the titles of the blogs that you follow and want to read, and it presents them all to you in one reading pane. Mentioned Facebook briefly earlier. Please don't underestimate the power of social media. It's how you're going to find the younger generations of your grandfather and grandmother's siblings, descendants. You'll find the names in the right combination on Facebook. You might also find other family members there too in their photos. So it's at this stage that I congratulate you all. You're now all honorary members of the Genealogy Brickwall Association, and I hope you have a long and very useful membership. But of course, just when you've broken down your one brick wall, it's time to start work all over again, looking for the next one. And remember, you need to put the right bait out to catch your cousins. So make sure you're posting bits of family tree. During this evening, we've covered a whole load of different ideas for things that you can do to try to break down your genealogy brick walls, structured research, plans, things that you can do and try, ideas for things you can use technology-wise, family history sites, web search sites, for example, things that you can do to acquire additional learning to help with your family history. I think it's at this stage I tell you that our next session will be UK genealogy on the 18th of January. We'll send the link out fairly soon. I'd like to thank you for joining us today and to invite you to ask any questions. You ask a question by clicking on the raise your hand symbol in the console. A box will come up. You then type the question into the box, and Mark will relay the question to me. I'll repeat it and attempt to answer. Thank you.
Marianne says that on Cindy's list, if you come across a broken link on the site, don't think there's nothing you can do about it, or that something relevant, do report it, and Cindy will quickly sort out the problem.
Marianne's very helpfully said, which is quite right, if you're on Cindy's list and you come across a broken list at any time, please don't think, oh, just a broken list, can't be bothered. Report it to Cindy. She's a real person. I know, I've met her. She will correct the link, find the new one, or put a note about it on the website to update the information she's got on the website. So definitely, yeah, thank you. Any other questions?
Somebody just needs the 16th of November
Somebody wants the last handout. Okay, if Mark writes that down for me, I will send the other handout out, no problem. Any other questions?
Internet.
Is there a question from anybody? Mark?
Right. Peter Heinelman asks, where are the Hessen and Lord Rhine-Westphalia and RF state archives kept?
Okay, Peter's asking me about various archives in Germany. Peter, I'll answer your ping me an email with the which archives you want the addresses for, and I will send you that information. I think he's asking about different archives for Nordrhein-Westphalia, for Rhineland-Pfalz, and that's it.
Hessen.
Oh, and Hessen. I'll send you that information separately. Any other questions for anybody? Doesn't look like there are any more questions. In which case, ladies and gents, thank you very much for joining us this evening. All good wishes for the holidays and a very happy 2018. See you all in January. Thank you very much.